Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me. My name is Todd Wayne, and I've been researching and investigating the paranormal for over 20 years. Throughout those years, I've encountered many strange anomalies, and I've compiled some very compelling evidence from my paranormal journeys. Now, after all these years, I'd like to share with you some of my stories and encounters from beyond the veil and the grave. So join me every Saturday, where I'll be talking about all things paranormal. So grab yourself a beverage, some snacks, dim the lights on the way back, find yourself a nice comfy spot, and enjoy these exciting episodes of Paranomaly. Hey everyone, Todd here. You know, back in 1942, February 24th, what happened over the skies of Los Angeles? I mean, there was 1,400 rounds of anti-aircraft projectiles fired, and nobody seems to know exactly what it was. Was it Japanese warplanes? Was it just nerves from being on such high alert from possible Japanese attack or invasion? Was it a false alarm, training exercise, a blimp, a weather balloon? Was it a UFO or UFO invasion? You know, that's the mystery, and it's going to remain that way because nobody seems to be able to answer these questions. So, we're going to delve into it on this episode of Paranomaly. Stay with us. So what happened on those early morning hours over the Los Angeles skies? Well, here's Byron Palmer's news report from February 26, 1942.
The news of the world, Wednesday, February 25th. Once again, Columbia's correspondents in world capitals and in the fighting zones in the Western Pacific are ready to give you the latest news direct by shortwave radio.
And now for news of our own West Coast, we take you to Los Angeles and the report of Byron Palmer.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning. The anti-aircraft guns began barking during a blackout ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Army officials declined to comment on the possibility that the object might have been a blimp. However, it required nearly 30 minutes to travel some 25 miles, far slower than an airplane. Watchers on the rooftop of the Columbia Broadcasting Building in the heart of Hollywood could plainly see the flashes of guns and searchlights sweeping the skies in a wide arc along the coastal area. Concussion of the shells could be felt in downtown Los Angeles, 15 miles away. U.S. Army planes quickly took to the dark skies, but whether they contacted the object has not been announced. Army officials say they will not comment until they receive a full report of the action. Although some watchers say they saw airplanes in the air, semi-official sources say they probably were the U.S. Army's pursuit. Several observers say they saw one or more planes spotlighted by 20 or 30 searchlights. The object moved southward, presumably over Huntington Park, at the western edge of Los Angeles and on southward to about Long Beach on the coast. By 3:30 a.m., observers said the object appeared to be over the south of Long Beach. Searchlights closely followed the object down the coast and kept it centered in their glare. Shells frequently could be seen bursting near the object, but none appeared to hit it. The shooting stopped about 3:30 a.m. The shooting brought warfare to the front door of this city of 1.25 million population for the first time since December 7th. Already it was alert to the presence off the Southern California coast of a Japanese submarine which had pumped 25 shells into an oil field north of Santa Barbara Monday evening. Because of the presence of the submarine, a 3-hour alert was ordered at dusk last night, and civilian authorities stood at their posts while the Army and Navy continued their search for the submersible. The evening alert ended at 10:23 p.m., but another was sounded at 2:22 a.m., and the blackout followed within 3 minutes. It covered Los Angeles County from Santa Monica to Pomona. At 2:27, all Southern California radio stations were ordered off the air, except those in San Diego. Approximately 20 minutes after the firing died down, the ship returned and headed westward from Long Beach toward Santa Monica. The guns went into action again, hurling round after round of shells at the object. The second barrage appeared to be closer to downtown Los Angeles, since watchers could hear the concussion of the guns more clearly, and the flash of bursting shells was brighter. Then the ship disappeared for the second time over the ocean. We return you now to CBS in New York.
The Navy immediately insisted that there was no evidence of the presence of enemy planes, and the Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, he announced at his press conference on the 25th of February that the raid was just a false alarm. And at the time of the conference, he admitted that attacks were always a possibility and indicated that the vital industries located along the coast should be moved inland. Now, the Army had a hard time explaining and making up its mind to the cause of the alert. A report to Washington made by the Western Defense Command shortly after the raid had ended indicated that the credibility of reports of an attack had begun before the blackout was lifted. So this message predicted that developments would prove that most previous reports had been greatly exaggerated. Now, the 4th Air Force had indicated its belief that there were no planes over Los Angeles. But the Army did not publish these initial conclusions. Instead, it waited a day until after thorough examination of witnesses had been finished. Now, on the basis of these hearings, local commanders altered their verdict and indicated a belief that from 1 to 5 unidentified airplanes had been over Los Angeles. Secretary Stimson announced this conclusion as the War Department's version of the incident, and he advanced 2 theories to account for the mysterious craft. Either they were commercial planes operated by an enemy from secret fields in California or Mexico, or they were light planes launched from Japanese submarines. In either case, the enemy's purpose must have been to locate anti-aircraft defenses in the area or to deliver a blow to civilian morale. The divergence of views between the War and the Navy departments and unsatisfying conjectures advanced by the Army to explain the affair touched off vigorous public discussion. The Los Angeles Times, in a first-page editorial on the 26th of February, announced that the considerable public excitement and confusion caused by the alert, as well as its spectacular official accompaniments, demanded a careful explanation. Fears were expressed, and a few phony raids undermined the confidence of civilian volunteers in the Aircraft Warning Service. And in the United States Congress, Representative Leland Ford wanted to know whether the incident was a practice raid, or a raid to throw a scare into 200,000 people, or a mistaken identity raid, or a raid to take away Southern California's war industries. Wendell Willkie, speaking in Los Angeles on the 26th of February, assured Californians on the basis of his experiences in England that when a real air raid began, you wouldn't have to argue about it. You'll just know. He said that military authorities had been correct in calling a precautionary alert, but deplored the lack of agreement between the Army and the Navy. A strong editorial in the Washington Post on the 27th of February called the handling of the Los Angeles episode a recipe for jitters, and censured the military authorities for what it called stubborn silence in the face of widespread uncertainty. The editorial suggested that the Army's theory that commercial planes might have caused the alert explains everything except where the planes came from, where they are going, and why no American planes were sent in pursuit of them. The New York Times on the 28th of February expressed a belief that the more the incident was studied, the more incredible it became. If the batteries were firing on nothing at all, as Secretary Knox implies, it is a sign of expensive incompetence and jitters. If the batteries were firing on real planes, some of them as low as 9,000 feet, as Secretary Stimson declares, why were they completely ineffective? Why did no American planes go up to engage them, or even to identify them? What would have happened if this had been a real air raid? These questions were appropriate, but for the War Department to have answered them in full frankness would have involved an even more complete revelation of the weakness of our air defenses. Now, at the end of the war, the Japanese stated they did not send planes over the area at the time of this alert. Now, although submarine-launched aircraft was subsequently used over Seattle. Now, a careful study of the evidence suggests that meteorological balloons known to have been released over Los Angeles may well have caused the initial alarm. This theory is supported by the fact that anti-aircraft artillery units were officially criticized for having wasted ammunition on targets which moved too slowly to have been airplanes. Now, after the firing started, careful observation was difficult because of drifting smoke and shell bursts. The acting commander of the anti-aircraft artillery brigade in the area testified that he had first been convinced that he had seen 15 planes in the air, but had quickly decided that he was seeing smoke. Correspondents like Ernie Pyle and Bill Henry witnessed the shooting and wrote that they were never able to make out an airplane. It's hard to see in any event what the enemy purpose would have been by an attack in which no bombs were dropped, unless perhaps, as Mr. Stimson suggested, the purpose had been for reconnaissance. Now, some of the panic in Los Angeles was caused when a number of witnesses reportedly sighted a large round object in the skies over Culver City and Santa Monica. Both neighborhoods are on the west side of town and closer to the Pacific Ocean. The object was barraged with more than 1,400 shells from anti-aircraft guns with no visible effect, until it eventually drifted leisurely south towards Long Beach and vanished from view. Now, most reports described it as a pale, orange in color and glowing object. So what really happened in the early morning hours in the skies over Los Angeles? According to the government and military officials, it was either Japanese planes, war nerves from being on high alert for a possible Japanese attack or invasion, a false alarm, a training exercise, a blimp, a weather balloon, or according to some eyewitnesses, a UFO or UFO invasion. In 2004, Huell Hauser, while at Fort MacArthur, interviewed some of the veterans who were there, and they were asked what they believed that night that happened. Well, here's what they had to say.
You all were all here that morning. How many of you think that the Japanese raided Los Angeles that night? One lady.
I didn't really think it for sure, but it sure looked like it.
What did it look like?
Well, I lived in Whittier, And you could see it from there. We were in the house, my brothers and I. We were in the house, and we heard these guns going off, and we went out in the front, and here we saw these lights all to the sky, and we hear these guns. But we couldn't see what they were shooting at.
But you thought you were being attacked.
Yeah, we did.
Was it frightening? There's a lot of action here.
Well, I was at headquarters down on the main reservation at night, called out, and there were planes, I assume they were, in very close formation, and there I could see the anti-aircraft fire, which only got 2/3 of the way up there. You could see the tracers, and they didn't get anywhere near it, and they sort of headed towards, San Diego or Mexico.
How many planes were there?
Well, I remember counting 6 or 8.
Were they Japanese planes?
I haven't the slightest idea. All they were was spots in the sky.
I personally didn't see the planes. I talked to the Navy afterwards, but I was up here at the Korean Temple, and the base ring of a caliber 50 gun is still there. And the executive officer, Fort MacArthur, Lieutenant Colonel Snell, ordered me up here, and he says, "Fire!" And I said, "At what, sir?" "Fire!" And I hope he's not living and mad at me, but there were no planes, and later on, there was a gun battery of the 203rd Coast Artillery, the Hound Dog outfit, that they were fooling around, and one of their guns accidentally went off. That started it.
So everybody was firing.
And Colonel Snell says, "They're over there."
I was stationed in the Army at Seal Beach, and we all got out and watched it. We saw something, but it's nothing definite. Seemed to be something circling slow around.
Well, what did you think it was? People really didn't know, did they? And that's what got everybody.
I was standing next to my commanding officer. He said, "It looks like an airplane to me," but nobody seems to know, really.
Well, this is amazing.
There was a bunch of shrapnel, shell fragments all over Los Angeles County. And
yeah, we have some. Where's the shrapnel? Come on over here, John. Look, we have some pieces of shrapnel.
That's right. Picked up
because there was so much anti-aircraft fire.
Right.
It was showering Los Angeles, and there was more damage being done by the shrapnel falling than there was by this attack that really wasn't an attack.
One man sued the Army for damages to the fender on his car that was dented. Actually, there were casualties. 5 people in Los Angeles County died of a heart attack.
Just from the noise and being afraid.
Well, they were being afraid. And
now, who else has got some stories?
Yes, sir. I was a radar operator at the Esplanade on Redondo Beach. We were called and told there was going to be a target coming in. Our radar had a range of 18 miles. We had to wait till that target got it within our range. We picked it up finally, and we turned the lights on it. It was a meteorologist balloon with a wavelength of wire tied to the balloon so that the radar would pick it up.
Right. So you think that's what people were firing at, was a balloon?
I don't think they were firing at it. They were firing over this way, like this, over low. They weren't firing way up there. That thing was up there 30,000 feet. And that was the one that came in from up this area. I don't know about what went down here.
But from the headlines in the papers, people really thought that we were being attacked by the Japanese.
Absolutely.
The purpose of that raid and all the firing was to see how many saboteurs they could find around the area. That was the main purpose for it.
Okay.
I have a different idea on this thing.
Uh-oh.
And I was down here right at Fort MacArthur at the middle reservation. The sirens went off. We got dressed, went out, and we got all the lights going all over the place. A little bit of anti-aircraft fire far away, and this, I didn't realize it even this close to the middle reservation. there's one thing about all of this newspaper stuff. It isn't any different now than it was then. They jump on it and they put all of this fabrication in so they can sell the papers.
Blew it out of proportion.
On top of that, it would get the people riled up a little bit, and they'd say, oh, we got to do better on this war effort. And, of course, that's it. But there were no planes. I didn't see a plane, and I was out there for an hour at least.
What did it sound like?
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. The sirens started going, and so we knew it was an air raid. And my mother, I was a young girl living in Los Angeles. My mother was an air raid warden. So my brother and my mother and I went out on the front porch. The searchlights crisscrossed the sky. The flak or the shrapnel was falling. And I took one look at it and fainted dead away.
You're kidding.
I was so embarrassed for being such a wimp.
Well, you thought you were being attacked.
Well, of course.
This is some serious stuff here.
You bet.
I mean, this stuff is meant to destroy airplanes. It's also meant to kill people.
You bet. That's exactly what it's designed to do.
So what was the controversy? This must have been terribly controversial.
Well, it was, and it was hushed up. There was a lot of quiet about it. I mean, this obviously isn't hushing, but
the front page of the paper.
But after this, there was pretty much there's no reports of it.
Because the Navy didn't want to take responsibility. They didn't want to be embarrassed. The Army didn't want to be embarrassed. The Civil Defense didn't want to be embarrassed. The politicians didn't want to be embarrassed. So really, it just kind of went away.
Yes, that's correct.
Definitely a farce. Absolutely. A farce. Absolutely.
So the whole thing, let's get that newspaper back up here. Come on over here. Steve, where's that other newspaper? We got one here, Guns Roar at L.A., another one, L.A. area raided, the front page of the Los Angeles Times. And what was the word you used for it?
I said it was a farce.
Or baloney. It just didn't happen. The planes were there, the lights were there, the guns fired, but that's all. Nobody hit anything.
So there's an example of one of the 3-inch gun shells that were fired that evening. How many of those were fired around here, Steve?
Well, those types and others, there were about 2,000 total.
2,000 of those went up in the air.
Yes, that's correct.
Over Los Angeles and all of Southern California, raining down shrapnel like rain. It was pouring down. And here are the people right here who were here that night for the air raid over L.A., the Japanese attack that really never happened.
So there you have it, everyone. Huell Hauser's 2004 interview at Fort MacArthur with World War II veterans, talking about what they believe happened back in 1942. So, the mystery still remains. And although eyewitnesses reported seeing a single large unidentified object over L.A., a number of others also reported spotting anywhere from 25 to 200 planes swarming over the metropolitan area. But not a single bomb was dropped, and not a single enemy fighter was brought down. The round object itself was never recovered or seen again, despite the official explanation. No real answer to what or who started the Battle of Los Angeles has ever been found. So we'll never know what really happened that night over the skies of Los Angeles. But we do know, however, the government liked to use weather balloon to explain unidentified flying objects, or UFOs, back as evident by the 1947 Roswell incident and others. So is the government lying when they say UFO? I don't believe they're lying at all when they say UFO. See, that's just their safe word when they have no clue what something is. So in truth, it is an unidentified flying object. Now, the general population, on the other hand, hears the words unidentified flying object or UFO and jumps straight to extraterrestrial flying saucers and aliens. Unfortunately, the powers that be can't use blimps and weather balloons as their go-to excuses today because everyone has a portable camera and video device in their pocket. And unlike those days, people today are more open to the idea of UFOs and aliens. Whereas back in those days, there would have definitely been mass pandemonium. So what do you think really happened? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you very much for listening to this episode of Paranomaly.